Hello students, today we are going to read a very nice and famous story, The Enemy, by the world famous writer Paul S. Buck. Paul Sidenstryker Buck. Paul S. Buck. She was born in America. She is an American writer. She was born in 1892 and died in 1973. She lived in China and her name is Shai Zhenjiu, Chinese name. Is that clear? She won the prestigious Pulitzer Prize in 1932 and the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1938. And this story is special because it is easy and simple in writing. That's why you will not find it very difficult to read. The students will find it easy to read. The setting or the background of this story is World War II. America and Japan were at war. America and Japan were at war. This is the background of this story. And the theme is Sadao Hoki, who is the protagonist, the main character in this story. Sadao Hoki, by profession a doctor. So he is torn between the two ideals, his professional and human ethics versus his patriotism. This is the focal point in this story. Is that clear? This is the background of this story. You will read about Dr. Sadao Hoki's dilemma, Sadao Hoki's difficulty in taking a definite course of action. What he is doing is right or wrong. It is a matter of debate. It gives rise to a debatable topic. Whether patriotism is important or human ethics, human life is important. Certainly, the writer advocates human life is important. That's why Sadao Hoki takes that course of action. So, these are the main characters. Sadao Hoki and Hana Hoki is his wife. Sadao's father is a typical Japanese person. Sadao's father. In this story, the role of the general is dubious. There is an army general. His role is dubious because he secretly helps Sadao Hoki. Dr. Sadao Hoki was a renowned surgeon, was an eminent surgeon of Japan, and the general was his patient. The general was under his treatment. The old general, who was infamous during his lifetime, during his prime time, during his youth days, he was known for his cruelty. But he excuses the general last week. He excused him and says the due reward would be given to Dr. Sadao Hoki. Tom is also an important character. He is an American prisoner of war, and Sadao Hoki unwillingly gives him treatment, saves his life. And this is the question whether he should save his life, Tom's life, or not. This is the matter of debate. Some people say Sadao Hoki was right, some say he was wrong, but I think when you consider it, he is doing a right thing. So Sadao's life is very blissful, happy married life, happy conjugal life, happy conjugal life. They met in America, Sadao and Hana, but they solemnized their marriage as per the wish of Sadao's father. She was also a Japanese, Hana was also a Japanese, so the father allowed the marriage and it was solemnized accordingly. Sadao's house was on a beach in a coastal town. His house was just on the beach where you will see bent pines grew. And as a boy, Sadao used to climb. You will read the story, Sadao's life from the childhood. He was under the care of his father, his married life, and then the patient, Tom, who was vast ashore on Sadao's doorsteps. Sadao and Hana, they were in a dilemma what to do, what not to do. But finally, Sadao's human spirit urged him to save the life of this bullet-injured prisoner of war who was an American. And due to this, the servants, Judy, gardener, and the cook, they all left him. But later on, what happens? Everything turns to normalcy. The Japanese prisoner of war, Tom, returns back home. He is safe. His life is saved. And he returns back. Sadao sends him back in his private boat, arranges for his safe life, safe passage in a Korean ship. So this is the story, this main theme. We will read this story and we will see the story writer has made it very real-like experience. Dr. Sadao Hoki's house was built on a spot of the Japanese coast where as a little boy he had often played. The low square stone house was set upon rocks well above a narrow beach that was outlined with bent pines. As a boy, Sadao had climbed the pines, supporting himself on his bare feet, as he had seen men do in the South Seas when they climbed for coconuts. His father had taken him often to the islands of those seas, and never had he failed to say to the little brave boy at his side, "Those islands yonder, they are the stepping stones to the future for Japan." Japan's relation with East and West relationship, Japan will decide. "Where shall we step from them?" Sadao had asked seriously. Who knows what the consequences would be, the relationship between East and West, the consequences could bring Japan's prosperity or could bring Japan's ruin. Or the atomization of the two cities in Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it was because of the relationship, the harsh relationship. Where shall we step from them? Nobody knows. Who knows? Who can limit our future? It depends on what we make it. His father was practical and he said, what we make it, it depends on our outlook, our positivity. Shadau had taken this into his mind as he did everything his father said. His positivism he took, and he was a true follower of his father. His father who never joked or played with him, but who spent infinite pains upon him, who was his only son. His entire life was dependent on his son, and he always looked for the future. He always cared for the future of his son. Shadau knew that his education was his father's chief concern, prime concern. For this reason, he had sent at 22 to America to learn all that he could be learned of surgery and medicine. He had come back at 30, and before his father died, he had seen Shadau become famous not only as a surgeon but as a scientist. He was a medical scientist. He was doing discovery in medical sciences because he was perfecting a discovery which would render wounds entirely clean without leaving any mark. So he was doing research work on that topic. That's why he had not been sent abroad with the troops. Also he knew there was some slight danger that the old general might need an operation for a condition for which he was now being treated medically, and for his possibilities Shadau was being kept in Japan. So these are the hidden and the open reasons why Shadau Hoki was not sent with the medical team with the army troop. So this is the background. Shadau Hoki's life under the care of his father. His father was a satisfied father. So one unassuming, normal night, evening, what happens? Clouds were rising from the ocean now. The unexpected warmth of the past few days had at night drawn heavy fog from the cold waves. Shadau was mist, wide outlines of a little island near the shore, and then come creeping up the beach below the house, wreathing around the pines. Wreathing means circling around the pines. In a few minutes, fog would be wrapped about the house too. It was in the coastal areas, fog in the evening envelops everything. Then he would go into the room where Hannah, his wife, would be waiting for him with the 2 children. But at this moment, the door opened and she looked out. A dark blue woolen haroi is footnoted here, a Japanese dress, you can say a gown, or kimono, worn over the kimono, the outermost gown, haroi, over her kimono. She came to him affectionately, lovingly. The husband and wife were there in the balcony outside the house, and put her arm through him as he stood, smiled and said nothing. He had met Hannah. This closer, this proximity reminded Shadau Hoki of his marriage, how he had met Hannah in America. But he had waited to fall in love with her until he was sure she was Japanese, because his father, Shadau's father, would not approve, would never have received her unless he had been pure in her race, a Japanese. He wondered often whom he would have married if he had not met Hannah, and by what luck he had found her in the most casual way, by chance, literally, at an American professor's house. The professor and his wife had been kind people, anxious to do something for their few foreign students, and the students, though bored, had accepted his kindness, this kindness of the professor. Shadau had often told Hannah how nearly he had not gone to Professor Harley's house. Professor Harley, an American professor, he was a very kind person. That night, the rooms were so small, the food so bad, the professor's wife so voluble, talkative, But he had gone and there he had found Hannah, a new student, and had felt he would love her if it were at all possible. So this is the background of their meeting in America. And though Sadao was impressed, it was by chance that at the professor's house he found a Japanese girl, a new student, and he waited to know about her before falling in love. When he confirmed that she would stand, she would stand his father's choice, she would come up to his father's choice, then he would marry, and he wondered if he had not met Hannah, whom he would have married. So this is the evening time. If and when they are enjoying the weather, soon it would be foggy and they would be inside the house. Now he felt her hand on his arm and was aware of the pleasure it gave him, even though they had been married years enough to have the two children, for they had not married heedlessly in America, carelessly. They had planned everything in America. They had finished their work at school and had come home to Japan, and when his father had seen her, the marriage had been arranged in the old Japanese way. Although Sadao and Hannah had talked everything over beforehand, they were perfectly happy. So such planned marriages are always happy. She laid her cheek against his arm. Still there was love. It was at this moment that both of them saw something black come out of the mist. Mist means, darkness of the foggy weather. It was a man, something coming out of the sea. It was the outline of a man. Outline, the shape of a man. He was flung up out of the ocean. The sea had flung him up as the sea has thrown him up. They saw that the man had been thrown out of the sea, flung, thrown. It seemed to his feet by a breaker. Breaker is wave. He staggered, wagged, faltered, wagged unsteadily, weakly, a few steps, his body outlined against the mist, his arms above his head. Then the curled mist hid him again. Then he was again invisible, means he was not to be seen because he had fallen perhaps. Who is that? Hannah cried. Hannah from her house, from above cried, who is that? She dropped Sadao's arm she was holding, and they both leaned over the railing of the veranda. Now they saw him again. By leaning means bending down, they both saw him again, the man. The man was on his hands and knees scowling. His identity was not known. They first mistook him to be some fisherman from the nearby village. They saw him fall on his face and lie there. A fisherman, perhaps, Sadao said, was from his boat. He ran quickly down the steps, and behind him, Hannah came, her wide sleeves flying, open sleeves flying. A mile or two away on either side there were fishing villages, but here was only the bare and lonely coast. The fishermen's villages were there, but Sadao's house was bare and lonely at this coast, somewhat distant, at some distance. Dangerous with rocks. It was safe because nobody could dare come to this place. The sea was the protecting thing. The sea was dangerous with rocks. Here rocks were pointed and it was dangerous. Somehow the man has managed to come through them. He must be badly torn. Though the man had come out, had been thrown out, but he must have been badly torn, badly injured by the rocks, pointed rocks, he thought. They saw when they came toward him that indeed it was so. When they came down, they found him badly injured. The sand on one side of him had already a stain of red soaking though, blood, red soaking. The sand was there, reddened. He is wounded, Sudhao exclaimed. He made haste to the man, and he hastily went near to the man who lay motionless. The man was unconscious, motionless. His face in the sand, his face was turned down. His face was just towards the ground, so they could not see the face. An old cap stuck to his head soaked with sea water, and a wet cap was stuck, means stick fast, was fixed to his head. He was in wet rags of garments, and his garments, his clothes were ragged, were all torn. Sudhao stopped, Hana at his side. Sudhao stopped with his wife at his side and turned the man's head. They saw the face. When Sudhao turned the man's and they saw the face, they were surprised. A white man, Hana whispered. Hana said softly in a low voice, a white man. White man means here a European. He appears to be a European. Means American. Yes, it was a white man. And it was clear, there was no doubt. The face was visible now, clearly. The wet cap fell away and there was his wet yellow hair. From the appearance, you can say wet yellow hair, long as though for many weeks it had not been cut, and upon his young and tortured face was a rough yellow beard. The color of the beard and the hair that was yellow. He was unconscious and he knew nothing that they did for him, that they had turned him down, turned him over. He knew nothing. Now Sudhao remembered the wound, but Sudhao was a doctor and he suddenly realized that he had come to save the life or the man was wounded. And with his expert fingers he began to search for the wounds. Where were the wounds? Wherefrom the blood was oozing, flowing freshly at his touch. When Sudhao touched, fresh flow of blood came from the body. And Sudhao searched the spot where the body was wounded. On the right side of his lower back, Sudhao saw that a gun wound had been reopened. A gun wound. He was injured by bullets, gun. Perhaps he was running away and the soldiers wounded him in the back, lower back. And that wound had reopened. The flesh was blackened with powder. Powder means here gunpowder. Sometimes, not many days ago, the man had been shot and had not been treated. So, in near future, 1 or 2 days back, 2 days ago, the man had been shot. It was clear. The doctor learned that. He was an expert. From the wounds, he drew the conclusion that he was not given treatment, and so the poison of the powder had blackened the nearby skin, and that wound was very deep. Oh, how he is bleeding! Hana whispered again in a solemn voice, in a serious voice. The mists screened them now completely. Now the mists had gathered and they were hidden from the outsiders. Nobody could see them there, down below their house. The fishermen had gone home, and even the chance beachcombers would have considered the day at an end. So beachcombers, the patrolling, police patrolling, those who keep guard on the beaches, beachcombers, they had also gone because they had seen the day end. Nobody was there, fishermen had all gone, nobody was at the coast, so beachcombers also had gone. What shall we do with this man? Sudhao muttered. Now this was the question. Sudhao asked, what is the next course of action. Thou muttered, spoke softly, spoke slowly, but his trained hands seemed of their own will to be doing what they could to stanch the fearful bleeding, stop, to pack, stanch the fearful bleeding. The bleeding was fearful in the body. He packed the wound with the sea moss. Moss, grass, green grass. The moss that strewed the beach, that was scattered over the beach. The man moaned with pain. Moaned means wailed, cried in pain, in his stupor, unconscious state. But he did not awaken. The best thing that we could do would be to put him back in the sea, Thou said, answering himself. So thou asked what we are going to do. And the answer, he himself said that the best thing would be to put him back into the sea. Let him be on the mercy of God in the sea. Yes, undoubtedly that would be the best thing. Hannah said steadily. Hannah also, as an obedient wife, you will see also told him the same thing, that undoubtedly, there is no doubt it will be the best thing. But she continued to stare down at the motionless man. But Hannah was also looking at the unconscious man pitiably. If we sheltered a white man in our house, we should be arrested, and if we turned him over as a prisoner, he would certainly die, she now said. Death is the only fate that I can visualize for him in near future. Because if we are getting arrested, if we shelter him, a white man in our house, it is risky to have a prisoner of war. Prisoner of war, Tom. The kindest thing would be to put him back into the sea, Hannah said, but neither of them moved. It was a cruel thing, and none of them was cruel enough to put him back into the sea. That was an idea, but that was a cruel act. That idea was a cruel one, and so nobody acted upon. The kindest thing would be to put him back into the sea. This was the idea reiterated many times, but none dared to act on this idea, Hannah said. But neither of them moved. They were staring with a curious repulsion upon the inert figure, inert, inactive figure here, that is the prisoner of war in the unconscious state. They stared at him, looking fixedly what to do, what not to do. This was the question, the dilemma, the hard choice, difficult to decide. What is he? Hannah whispered. What is he? His identity. There is something about him that looks American, so thou said. He took up the battered cap. Yes, there almost gone was the faint lettering. A sailor, he said, from an American warship, he spelled it out, U.S. Navy. A sailor, U.S. Navy, the faint lettering, the letters had gone, but the marks were there on the cap, and it was now very clear that the man was not an American only, but he was an American soldier, and he was a prisoner of war who tried to run away, who tried to escape, and he was shot in his lower back. The story becomes clear. So he has escaped. He was running away from the captivity of the Japanese soldiers. So the Japanese soldiers had attacked him and attacked him with bullet, and he was injured in the back. So thou agreed. They hesitated, looking at each other. Then Hannah said with resolution, Come, are we able to put him back into the sea? If I am able, are you? She now asked. No, Hannah said. Hannah plainly said, no, I can't help you in this matter. You have to do it alone. Sudhao hesitated again. He alone could not do it, or he was not in favor of this idea. This idea was good for their safety, but nobody dared to act upon the idea. If the man were whole, I could turn him over to the police without difficulty. Sudhao said, if the man were whole means if the man were not injured, if he were in his senses, where is the conditional, where imaginary condition, if he were in that healthy condition, I care nothing for him. I care nothing for him. I don't like to favor him. He is my enemy. He is a prisoner and he is the enemy of Japan. All Americans are our enemy and he is only a common fellow. He is simply an American. You see how foolish his face is. But since he is wounded and he cannot protest, or it is a very harsh thing, it is a cruel thing, it is against humanity. The first and important thing is to, as a medical person, if he were not a medical person, that would not have been very difficult for him to inform the police. But as he was a medical person, he decided to give medical treatment first to save the life, and justice comes next. You also can't throw him back to the sea, Hannah said. It means you are also hesitating, you are also not deciding to throw him back. Then there is only one thing, we must carry him into the house. But the servants, Sudhao inquired, we must simply tell them that we intend, means our purpose is to give him back to the police. After giving him treatment, if he is safe, if he survives, if he becomes all right, if his wound is operated and he comes back to senses, if he becomes alive, we will hand him over to police. He is inert, he is lifeless now, like a lifeless person, like a dead body, not dead medically, but he was in the condition of unconsciousness. Stupor, S-T-U-P-O-R, stupor means unconsciousness. We must think of the children and your position. It would endanger all of us if we do not give this man over as a prisoner of war. Hannah said, your reputation, you are a famous doctor, and this will bring you, this will make you a culprit, and you will be in trouble if you keep him, if you don't hand him over to the police. So honestly, the only thing is that give him treatment for just keep him safe, and if he is saved, it is the only way to hand over to the police. So tell me, Sudhao agreed. Sudhao said, yes, I don't have any other idea. I will hand him over to the police with this intention. But the first thing is that in this condition, he cannot be handed over. His death is sure if he is not given treatment. So the first thing, being medical persons, we would think of giving him treatment. Thus agreed. Thus in this way, husband and wife agreed that after giving treatment, they would hand him over to the police. When he gets well, when he gets well, they would hand him over to the police. So this is the condition on which they brought him home. And Hannah said, I'll tell the servants that we don't have any bad intention. We are with the country. We will hand him over to the police, but we will, after giving him treatment, after curing his wounds. He was very light. Who was very light? The prisoner of war. They carried the man like a fowl. Fowl is a small bird, lightweight bird, fowl. that had been half starved for a long time, and that bird who had been starved for a long time, his condition you can imagine very weightless. So he was like feathers in the skeleton. Such a bird who has only skeletons and feathers on the body, like that bird, the soldier was weightless, very easy to carry. There was no weight in his body. There is a comparison here. So his arm hanging, they carried him up the steps and into the side door of the house. This door opened into a passage. And down the passage they carried the man towards an empty bedroom. It had been the bedroom of Sadhu's father. And since his death it had not been used. They laid the man on the deeply matted floor. Deeply matted floor means a very costly matting carpeted floor. Everything here had been Japanese to please the old man. Old man is Sadhu's father. This was his room and he made it, he had decorated it, furnished it in the Japanese fashion, Japanese style. So, who would never in his own home sit on a chair or sleep in a foreign bed. He was a great patriot, meaning to say. He loved everything Japanese. He didn't sit on a chair or sleep in a foreign bed. Hana went to the wall cupboards, almirahs that were fixed in the wall, and slid back a door and took out a soft quilt. She hesitated. The quilt was covered with thawed silk and the lining was pure white silk. The quilt was very costly. It was covered, very nice design and very nice texture, silk fabric. The cloth was very costly and it was designed beautifully, so Hana did not like to get it. Get it dirt, get it, she didn't want to make it dirty by the blood stains. He is so dirty, dirt, blood and mud, everything. He is so dirty, she murmured, I can't put him on this flowered silk